fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, and there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You've indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compel. Well, okay, compel. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let them in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you were referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. You get
NIH,
one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's Dr. Fauci.
I have to, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It didn't come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It is molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
not. You can't
not.
get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result
they are. No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And
won't
you
admit the truth.
and you
Senator
implying
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond. Dr.
and you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent
could
that.
have been.
And if anybody
could
is
have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we seek the truth wherever it may lead us. We usually cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. We've got a couple of big stories that the mainstream media has been ignoring for about 10 days now. We're going to look at Chernobyl in Ohio and what in the world is going on with this chemical explosion of this derailed train. Really interesting pieces that have been coming together this afternoon. We will have a live report from that area in East Palestine, Ohio. So a lot of really interesting, really troubling things for the people living there who have now permanently evacuated and said, I don't think I'm ever coming back because I can't trust my garden. I can't trust my water. The whole town is destroyed, essentially.
It's not just for people in that region because the Ohio River feeds into the Mississippi River. So this is going to affect people all along the eastern seaboard. We're going to show you the maps. We're going to show you what happened and show you who may have been responsible for what.
Edward Snowden weighing in on the big UFO invasion story. And once again, the United States government holding secret meetings today, classified behind the doors meetings about this UFO invasion and what concerns they have. We'll talk about all of that and why I believe it's a total distraction. And I agree with Edward Snowden, or Edward Snowden watches our show and agrees with us. I don't know. We'll unpack it, but that's coming up a little bit later.
Plus, Google wants to inoculate you. These are literally the words that they use against disinformation and misinformation. And they are going to be rolling out these pre-bunking videos, but they say they don't last for very long because people forget. So you're going to need pre-bunking boosters. So you'll be inoculated against misinformation, but you'll need boosters. Does that sound familiar? Not anything else? I like those words less and less every day.
God. You know, it's funny.
I'm just so glad Google's out there. I'm so glad Google's out there protecting my best interests.
Yes.
I really appreciate that, Google. Thanks.
Well, we're going to show you where they've started. Like, what is their cause de celeb? You know, of all the problems in the world that you can, latch onto for misinformation, like maybe scams against elderly people. Do you think they started there?
No.
You can put your guesses in the chat, and we're going to get to it in a few segments.
All right. So with all of that and more, we've got a lot of news to cover. Redacted starts right now. Right. Someone in our Rumble chat, ain't woke, don't fix it, says FUD, 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 FUD. That's exactly what they're talking. And that's exactly what's going on. And, the reason we call it that, something big is happening and they're trying to distract us. That is exactly what's happening. Like, this title of tonight's show could not be more accurate. Oh, shit. Something big is happening and they're trying to distract us. That's literally and that's exactly what Edward Snowden just said. And all you need to do is look at what's happening in Ukraine over the past 48 hours and see where they want your attention. So again, this is really, really troubling. And don't you forget, 3 years ago, almost to the day, is when they pulled off the last big thing that they tried to pull on us. Like the last major thing where we're going to go into lockdowns. Everyone's got to get a shot. Your business will now end. We're going to consolidate power in the hands of a few people.
Your kids won't be learning how to read.
Right. So it's only 3 years removed. Like, we have short memory, like sometimes.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't. Because for the last couple of years, have been thinking about, well, at this time last year, I wasn't able to do this. Oh, that's nice. We're able to do this. For instance, my son has his first football game. I just got a nasty email about that in the newsletter, football versus soccer. And he never was able to play in the first year he joined the team. And we're like, oh, you get a tournament this year. You can actually
play soccer.
I wonder if the rest of you are like me, just like going through the things that we can have now.
Yeah. Well, you know what you can have, which is, and hey, it's Happy Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to all of you guys out there, all of you ladies out there. Hope you guys are having a good date night, gathered up watching Redacted with us. We've got about 40,000 of you right now. So hope this is
that's fun.
So we're lovers. So we'll try to love you. We're loving people here. I got a really nasty email from someone last night, called me really, really nasty things. And I thought, who took the time to literally sit down at a computer and type this out to another human being? Like, that person is not lowering entropy in the world. That person is adding to the entropy and the chaos. Like,
Okay, you can tell about this email, and I can't talk about how I got a nasty email about soccer.
Well, I thought you were going to tell a school story, and I don't want to hear that.
Why can't we hear your stories and not mine?
Happy Valentine's Day.
That's so rude.
We're married. So anyway, we have a daily newsletter.
I wonder if people caught how he went like this and brushed me off to stop telling.
Because I thought you were going to go down a whole rabbit hole about the school and somebody saying that this and that. And there was like a parent-teacher thing, and I just didn't want to hear it. I hear it all day long. I thought save it for lunchtime. Hey, we have a daily newsletter that you can gather and download if you go to. Go to redacted.inc. It's a newsletter written by my lovely wife, who's sitting adjacent to me right now and is kicking me under the table. Redacted.inc. All you do, go there, not .com, and you put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email. And then tomorrow morning, you'll get a fantastic newsletter where we cover about 5 or 6 big stories of the day. We cover things you might have missed overnight. We try to do it with a little humor, try to make you laugh a little bit. But we're going to cover stories that the mainstream media does not want you to hear about. So we've been covering what's going on in Ethiopia and Syria, what's been happening in Ukraine, all of it. And we cover that in the morning newsletter that, again, you can read in about 5 minutes. So redacted.inc is the place to go. So moving on.
Are we moving on? You'll pay for that one later.
The kick heard around the world.
That's right. Let me get some coffee in me first. I hope everyone's doing well on this. Anybody have Valentine's Day plans? I mean, I know. Look, it's a Hallmark holiday and the whole thing, and it's just nice. Say something nice to your spouse, your partner.
Well, also it's super fun for the kids. Mm-hmm. They exchange, little niceties in a classroom with some candy, and they get super excited. And then our daughters, they got home and they made new Valentines for everyone in the house. You want to hear this story? I'm just going to keep going.
I don't want to hear this story. All right. You want to hear this story? All right, let's talk about this story because let's get to some news, all right? So this is Chernobyl happening in the United States right now. Those are the words being shared all across social media and around the world about a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, not far from where I used to live in Ohio. These are the words being said in China on social media in China and on Chinese television. But over the past 48 hours, if you turned on television in China or read social media in China, you would have seen amazing images of the Ohio train derailment that involved 50 trains. 10 of these train cars were carrying highly toxic chemicals known as vinyl chloride, among other chemicals we'll get to. These cars were burning for days, shooting highly toxic chemicals into the air, creating a dark plume of smoke that could be seen from outer space, by the way. Yeah, it was seen from outer space. And so this coverage could be readily accessed in China. And they're rightly saying or calling this America's Chernobyl event, where a town could permanently be devastated, people never coming back home again. This part of Ohio could be ruined for years, waterways ruined. We won't know the full extent of it yet, and we might not for years, by the way. And in fact, the word Chernobyl trending on Twitter this afternoon. Here it is. Hundreds of thousands of tweets all about Chernobyl. But turn on your television in the United States, and the coverage was and has been total silence on this story. The Ohio train derailment on the major media networks. Total blackout. Instead, focus on fake UFO invasion, all in an effort to draw us into a war with Russia and China. Now, just watch last night's. I want to show you the full introduction of the NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. This is the Monday edition. Okay? This is 9 days after this has happened. Everyone's talking about it on social media. We all know it's happened, but the mainstream media is ignoring the story. This is the top of their show where they lay out the whole 30-minute broadcast and see if you notice what's missing. Watch.
Tonight, the growing mystery and the race to recover those unidentified objects shot down by U.S. fighter jets. Defense Secretary Austin saying today they were a threat to civilian aircraft. 3 objects shot down over North American airspace in the last 3 days. But the questions, what are they and who may have sent them? And the unreal moment at today's briefing as the White House seeks to put to rest questions about extraterrestrial activity. Also tonight, the violent U-Haul rampage in New York City, striking pedestrians. 8 injured, some critically. What we're learning about the driver now in custody. The double storm threat packing snow and powerful winds, we're tracking it. The new miracle rescues, even as the death toll soars to 35,000 in the earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria. The 13-year-old boy pulled from the rubble today, more than 180 hours after disaster struck. The warning from NATO, a new Russian offensive long in planning, is now underway in Ukraine. Our Richard Engel in a city under siege. A terrifying plane plunge. Why did a United Airlines flight nearly nosedive into the Pacific Ocean? And the celebration in Kansas City after the Chiefs' thrilling Super Bowl win.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
All right.
So anything missing? At least we got the storms that are happening, and the Chiefs. We got the Kansas City Chiefs story.
You know what's crazy about that? Last night I started watching Newsroom again, and there's the part where they're talking about like this major story. It's like it's only yellow, and he's like they don't want to report the story of the I can't remember exactly what the story is, but it's like they probably know this story, they know what's going on, but they chose to ignore it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not like they're idiots. You've got a room full of 100 people that work on that show. It's their highest rated news broadcast. They know what's going on. They have affiliates in Ohio, in Cleveland.
Sure.
Nearby, in Pittsburgh, where this is nearby. They know what's going on. They're choosing to ignore it. Why ignore this story? We'll come back to that in a moment. So what the hell is going on in Ohio?
Well, maybe because it started to sort of stink of conspiracy on the internet, and then I feel like news producers now, if they see anything that stinks of conspiracy, they just throw it away. They won't instead unpack it and say, well, is there something there? I mean, I've been guilty of that in the past too. Things I didn't want to look at because they felt like...
Everyone watching right now has done that. We're like, I don't want to look into that. You know what? I've got enough going on.
But
I just don't.
That's not an excuse for national news producers. When you see the images of this is not a story that you can explain why you ignored it. Let's just go through the timeline of what happened and what justification there is for why it happened. The derailment happened on February 3rd in East Palestine, Ohio. There was actually 20 cars full of chemicals. Here is the crash site. So this is just the crash before the burn. Video from a warehouse along the track shows that it was on fire for at least 20 miles. So this is a warehouse, and their security footage caught this image of a train going by, and you'll see
this video obtained by our news partners at
go ahead and play the audio.
By a security camera at an equipment manufacturing plant in Salem, Ohio, some 20 miles from East Palestine. You can see what appear to be sparks or flames under one of the cars as it passes the plant.
So that looks bad. That means that it was flaming for at least 20 miles, because this footage is 20 miles from the crash site. So as it was going along, you'd hope somebody sort of caught that, but nobody did. The derailment, though, is not what caused the explosion. The rail company called Norfolk Southern is what caused the explosion. They told residents the weekend after the crash that they would be blowing up the site in what they called a controlled breach. Here is their website with updates just a few days after the crash. The one on the bottom was the first update, and then the update you see on the top. They said, we put together a plan to manually vent the cars. What they mean by vent the cars is blow them up, like get air inside of them. It said this will be done in a controlled fashion. To protect the environment, we have prepared pits and embankments to drain the material into which will then be remediated. When it is safe to do so, the manual release of pressure will be via a controlled breach of several rail cars and under the supervision of experts and first responders. This will be loud and visible, they said. They should have maybe put an exclamation point. I'm sorry it's so light that the text is not darker. Some of the material, they say, will burn off as it drains for a short number of hours. And we have been and will continue monitoring air quality with the Ohio EPA. Afterwards, cleanup work on the site can safely continue. And then there's this update where they say, okay, we did it. Rail cars have been successfully under the supervision of experts and first responders. Some of the material is now burning off consistent with expectation from earlier models. And it's expected to drain for a short while. So, which is interesting. So what they're saying here about the scientific models is they drew up some estimates of what it would look like to burn these, to blow them up. And they figured, okay, it's going to be this bad. Let's do it. And the way that they word it here makes me think, the way they say some of the material is now burning consistent with the models, meaning, whoa, it was a heck of a bigger explosion than we had anticipated. But now it's the size the models predicted.
Just look at that photo. I mean, that's unbelievable. Can you imagine like your kids in school, like down the road from that? No. Nothing to see here. No problem here at all. And I love that in their press release, there's basically saying, oh, you'll be able to see it. You'll probably be able to see it. What they should have put in there is you'll be able to see it from the moon.
Yeah, loud and visible is what they say.
When I photo on Twitter, I actually thought, because I was like, okay, there's this thing going on. I thought that cloud was photoshopped in.
It does
until I
look
actually
like
saw
that.
the photo, because it looked like it was not part of that photo. I was like, holy cow, that is real.
Yeah, it looks fake. I mean, it literally looks like a mushroom cloud, like someone just dropped a bomb, or like some television show like Jericho or something like that. In fact, there was a television show on Netflix called White Noise that was set in East Palestine. And isn't that amazing?
Yes, I'm going to tell you about it.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in a little bit later then, because a short time ago, I spoke to Nick Sortor, who just arrived in East Palestine, Ohio, to report on what was happening there. Let's listen to what I talked about with Nick. Watch. Well, joining us now from East Palestine, Ohio, is Nick Sortor. He's a U.S. political strategist who just got to East Palestine just a few hours ago and has been touring the crash site and speaking to the people there locally. Nick, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Clayton.
So you're literally right where the crash happened. Can you tell us what you're seeing, and we'll talk about what the people are saying in the town as well?
Sure. So right behind me here, you can actually see a lot of the remnants of the explosion that happened here 10 days ago. There is still a lot of work in progress. You've got Norfolk Southern has a huge recovery operation here. Mainly, it seems, according to the people, because they just want their tracks reopened. And, that makes a lot of sense. What we're not seeing is a large response from the federal government. I have not seen anybody with the EPA or any other of the alphabet soup agencies here on the ground. Right over here is, where you'll see that there's an actual intersection, and it actually happened right there. That is where the train car exploded.
And it doesn't appear to be like a lot of action there. Have they've been trying to keep you away from that site?
To an extent. So I was actually able to cross over there before. I was actually able to drive through, and then they put them on it. I guess they didn't like me doing that. But I was able to do that before, and I was actually able to talk to some of the property owners around there and get their sentiments on what was going on. In particular, the property that is closest to where the explosion happened. I was able to have about a 30-minute conversation with her, and she was able to...
What did she say?
She basically expressed the fact that the town has just been totally upended here. It's a small town. This is the epitome of small town America right here. This is the biggest shakeup they've ever had. Those were her words. People don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. They feel like they've just been abandoned here by the federal government, and they feel like they're about to get screwed because they don't trust their water sources anymore. They don't trust their own gardens anymore. One of the ladies I talked to said that she wasn't ever going to plant anything in her garden ever again, and felt like she needed to move her kids and her grandkids out of the town. And they're seriously worried that this town is going to die for this reason.
Of course, and the reason one of the reasons you probably went there is because this has been silent. There's been no coverage of this. Watching the mainstream media newscasts last night, no coverage of this, no discussion of this. In fact, the word Chernobyl, America's Chernobyl, has been trending on Twitter over the past 24, 48 hours, that this could be the equivalent of, what happened in Ukraine with nuclear fallout. Is that the sense that you're getting from talking to the people there, that they really feel like they might have to leave this town altogether?
They absolutely do, because the issue that they're most fearful of is what are the long-term health ramifications here? Because as you've seen with so many other, like Monsanto, that lawsuit there, it took years and years and years, and it was really difficult for them to prove, and a lot of people never even got paid out. The lady that I spoke to right over here that owned that property compared it. She said, "This is our Camp Lejeune." And that is, it's probably very true. I mean, they think that this is going to be totally covered up. They have not been able to get in contact with anybody since the governor did that press conference here at one time. You know, he did his, Mike DeWine did his rounds to,
right.
Make it look good, soften the blow or whatever. And then after that, just radio silence from everybody. They're getting no support here at all. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the media aren't, they're not here. They're not here. I'm the only one looking around here by myself. I haven't seen a single camera anywhere.
It's really unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And you described, just from a few hours there, can you describe the air quality? You were talking about it's bringing tears to your eyes. Can you explain what you're smelling, what you're seeing?
As soon as you get into the town, actually, it's probably in about a 5-mile radius. There is a very sweet chemically smell, right? It almost smells like burning rubber, if you know what burning rubber smells like.
Right.
But it's very overwhelming. It tickles the back of your throat. And yes, my eyes were watering for the first, hour and a half. The thing that I pointed out on Twitter anyway, and a lot of people understand this, is after a while, you kind of get used to a smell.
Right.
And so these people here may not be actually having that sense of smell of this toxicity that's in the air right now. And that's just going to be terribly lethal in the long run.
So have you seen...
They don't even know what they're breathing.
What are the businesses open downtown? You're very close to the downtown there in East Palestine. Again, a small town. Are businesses open? Are people actively commuting to and from work? Does it look like it's still business as usual or not?
No, there's very light traffic around here in general. There are a lot of people that have not come back yet. The evacuation orders were lifted, I believe earlier, or it was within the past week. And there are myriads of people, according to people that I have talked to, where, their friends won't come back. They're scared. They're scared, and they're getting no reinsurance from anybody. And so, yes, there are a lot of businesses downtown that are closed. And, it's sort of like, it's almost eerie. It's almost eerie. The majority of people in this town are here at this disaster site.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us. I know taking some time out as you're making your way around the town. Thank you for taking a few minutes to speak with us. We really appreciate it. I mean, please be safe. I mean, this is, of course, a major concern about the air quality, and I know the water quality is another big issue there with some of these chemicals. There's word, of course, that some of these chemicals could bind to water particles and basically stay in the water table for years to come. What are they saying before we let you go? Are they saying anything about the drinking water there before we let you go?
Yes, that's a great question. The lady that owns this property back here, it's straight across, actually. It's like I said, the closest property to where the explosion was. She mentioned that there's a drainage ditch that runs alongside the railroad tracks that goes straight into a creek. And that creek ended up being the one that I don't know if you saw it on the news, where there were a bunch of fish that had gone belly up and such, and it's still happening. There's still plenty of fish that are belly up over there. But it leads down into a larger stream that runs through 3 other towns before it gets to the Ohio River. And none of those people trust their drinking water at this point. They won't go out to eat. They won't, and it's worse for people that have well water. They're not going to drink out of their wells because they believe that this has infected their groundwater.
Absolutely. I would be terrified if my well water were near that. And then, of course, also air quality and heading towards Lake Erie as well. A lot of concerns. Nick, I'll let you get back to work. And thank you so much for taking a few minutes to speak with us. That's Nick Sorter there reporting in East Palestine, Ohio. Thanks so much for joining us, Nick.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you for covering this.
Thanks, Nick. And we hope for your safety there as well. And East Palestine, as I need to say it. Drill that into our brain. He did mention Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and let's take a look. People don't maybe not remember Camp Lejeune if you weren't in North Carolina. The contamination of the drinking water that happened in Camp Lejeune, from the 1950s all the way up into the 1980s. Cancer, miscarriages, everything. There's still wide open lawsuits for what happened to the contaminated drinking water that was allowed to those hazardous substances.
The lawyers are just getting started on this. They are just cracking their knuckles. Now, I want to bring you through a little bit of what the EPA is saying, because the statement that we showed you earlier from Norfolk Southern had sort of made it seem like the EPA is cooperating with us. They know about it. It's okay. We're working hand in hand. The EPA is not going along with that messaging. They sent a letter to the company last Friday telling them expect to be held liable for this for the foreseeable future and clean it up. They say that they have observed the following. Take a look at what they have, just documented on their own. Materials released during the incident observed and detected in samples from Sulphur Run, Leslie Run, Bull Creek, North Fork, Little Beaver Creek, and Ohio River. Materials related to the incident were absorbed entering storm drains.
Oh, good.
Multiple rail cars and tankers were observed derailed, breached, and on fire. Included these following materials: vinyl chloride, ethylene, glycol monobutyl ether. I'm not going to pronounce all of those. You can read them. 5 rail tankers of vinyl chloride were intentionally breached. The vinyl chloride was diverted to an excavated trench and then burned off. They said that in their statement. We're going to sort of coordinate it off, and it's going to be, and then we're clean it up, basically.
Right.
As if they could contain it, like a kitchen spill. Areas of contaminated soil and free liquids were observed and potentially covered and or filled during reconstruction of the rail line during portions of the trench and burn pit that was used for the open burn off of vinyl chloride. So they mention here the Ohio River, and I mentioned earlier that it runs into the Mississippi River. Here's a sort of map of how those rivers can join. So now this is everyone's problem. This can affect thousands of farms, and many livestock farms are already reporting dead animals, such as chickens, roosters, and foxes. And then, of course, we showed you the fish in the river. So the question is, did they have to burn this? Did their models underestimate what would happen? Well, one emergency response and hazard material technician put it this way. He is saying that if they had looked up, his name is Ryan Cunningham on Twitter, so we'll look at his information. So what he did was look up the contents of each car number and provides us with this chart here. Now, if you notice that there's a P there next to vinyl chloride, it says what that P means is that the material may undergo violent polymerization if heated or contaminated, which would cause the container to rupture or explode. And so see how he explains this. He says, if we review the guide, we see the immediate evacuation precautions should be taken. A reverse 911 that calls all citizens to be evacuated. He says he's also concerned that this material may be explosive when mixed with air, meaning it's sitting there volatile. This is a big deal. We can't just leave it alone. He says, as we start to dive deeper into the science of the material vinyl chloride, we find that it's highly volatile and has a boiling point of 7.9 Fahrenheit. So that means that if one of the tanks is damaged, we have a disaster on our hands. It's a ticking bomb sitting on the ground. We are at a risk of catastrophic BLEVE, known as boiling liquid vapor explosion. He says he doesn't know the quantity of the material, but if it exploded, if it was left like that, it could destroy the city, he said, if it was left. And so the decision was...
Well, they already kind of did destroy the city.
Well...
Just a quick question. Does that mean that it had to be cooled down the whole time it's been in transport? Because doesn't that, like 7.9, that's low.
Right. Yeah, a lot of questions here. And that's a good question. Maybe, Philip, do you have... What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, if its boiling point is 7.9 degrees Fahrenheit, it's definitely a refrigerated tanker. I mean, there's no way around that. Okay.
And so they're like, thankfully it's winter, but we cannot let this even get to room temperature. He says he believes that they decided to do a controlled burn of the pressure release values to minimize the potential of this.
Believe. I've seen people in the chat saying it's believe, EE, I guess. Okay.
To believe. At this point of the response, he says the options were limited. And so this is his conclusion. He says, given this limited facts, I see no option but to allow the material to burn. Of course, this doesn't dissolve the government responsibility to inform the public or to, I mean, is there any way to have done this safely? Or is this just like your options are the whole town goes up in flames or the whole town now has disease related to toxic exposure? Like these are our options.
Josh Ron 99 in the chat says, is this alarmism or is it realism? It's a good question. I mean, is what alarmism? Like, we're showing you what happened and showing you that people living in that town are saying that they don't want to drink the drinking water, and many have left and are not planning on coming back.
Right. I mean, again, this is one person's, he's an expert, but this is his analysis. But given all the liability, you'd think if he's right and they could prove this could explode and take out the town, and that's what our models show, and even like do a tiny experiment in the court, you can prove that in a court of law. Like, look, we had to burn it or it would have blown up the town.
Right.
That should be provable.
So instead we contaminated the town so that it's basically irreparable damage
I'm not
either
saying
way.
Well, that's what I'm asking. How is that any different? How is it like if they burn it, how does it stop the explosion part of it? Like, cause the explosion would have been heat, correct?
Yes, but he's saying the models would show an explosion like out and wide, right? And it would literally kill everybody. Well, the material getting to room temperature.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you live in this town, what's your preference? Right. To get blown up without any notice or to evacuate and then have a choice of whether or not to come back? Of course, the second one is what we would mostly choose, but these are awful options.
Yeah, and I'm just struck by something that Nick said earlier in our interview, is that now they're saying, like, that's fine. Like, you can start drinking your drinking water again. Really?
They clearly don't know that.
And there's fish going belly up. I mean, how are they telling you that your drinking water is fine? Like, that's unbelievable.
Right. And so, okay, but let's discuss these as if they are real possibilities, right? If you think you have a ticking time bomb in your crash, of course they evacuated the whole town. They did take it seriously. Like, get out of here right now. These are toxic things.
Yeah, but there is a lot of questions. Again, why is the federal government, why is there no mention of it? Why is the White House not talking about it? Pete Buttigieg totally ignored it yesterday when he did a public appearance, and he was talking. He said transportation in the United States is fantastic. It's fantastic. Really? We've had how many derailments in the past 48 hours in Houston, in South Carolina, in Ohio, and a massive chemical in Ohio.
Wasn't there a journalist even arrested trying to cover it? I saw a story on that.
We are going to get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to get to that.
Now, of course, Clayton mentioned in a twist of irony, this area of Ohio was the setting for a movie called White Noise that came out over Christmas with Adam Driver. And it is about this very thing, a train explosion and a town being evacuated. I actually watched this movie over Christmas, but I fell asleep, so I didn't get to the explosion part.
Yeah, and apparently there was extras. There were people hired from East Palestine who were in the movie. It was not filmed in East Palestine, but there's a lot of feels eerily similar to this. And then speaking of this reporter, there were reports, of course, of journalists being arrested. And on this story, that is true. Even Evan Lambert for News Nation was standing in the auditorium where Governor DeWine was going to speak when he was arrested for covering this story, to broadcast the story. And for no explanation, he was not allowed to cover it. He was told to pack up his cameras, get out of here, watch this. And he was there with his camera set up doing a live shot for the news. And then this happened. Watch.
Just stunning video. Our News Nation correspondent Evan Lambert being arrested in Ohio while reporting at a news conference.
Yes, he was there when he was asked to stop reporting during the time where the governor was speaking. Then law enforcement came up to him. You can see him speaking to them. It looks like the situation was becoming more tense. And then he was taken outside of the gymnasium where that news conference was being held. And taken to jail.
So that's how we treat journalists in the United States these days. So we're going to continue to watch this story. Again, it's amazing to see like independent journalists who are covering the story. Mainstream media is ignoring it. Some of the local news stations, of course, covering it. And international stations are coming in and covering it. So you have like literally it's being covered in China. And Al Jazeera is covering it. But you can't turn on your NBC Nightly News and find out any information about this, because this would definitely paint the Biden administration in a poor light. To have 4 train derailments in the past week with an entire town being evacuated.
Well, already there are 4 class action lawsuits in the works against this rail company. Rail workers. Now, you remember we talked about the rail strike in December.
Yeah.
We talked about this sort of shift timing, the way they give people shifts based on how many cars they can put together. This was a 150 car train.
Yeah.
And train workers are saying, we told you about this. We told you this was dangerous. So that is one element of it.
Yeah, we can't check the tracks. We can't analyze the tracks like we used to. So we can't check them for shunts
This is
or other
literally
problems.
something they were striking about.
Right.
And you might recall that the Biden administration passed legislation to remove their ability to strike.
Right.
So their ability to strike and fix this was removed in corporate interest by the Biden administration and Congress that signed this into law. They should absolutely answer for that. Like, hey, we might have had an opportunity. A rail strike would have been better than this. Like, so what? We had a few less, material in the world. Like, we might have fixed the strike in a matter of 2 weeks.
Right.
If there was maybe a slow
was
up
reading-
of goods rather than like people die of, cancer related to toxic exposure.
I was reading somewhere also that there's a lot of things the railroad uses that are still from like the 1800s. Like there's stuff needs to be updated.
Yeah, I'm glad. By the way, I'm glad we can spend $1 trillion a year on our military budget to attack other countries. But the United States of America is crumbling, and we can send $150 billion to Ukraine so that they can fix their railroads. But we can't fix our own railroads in the United States. Go ahead, Philip.
I mean, weren't the people in the West? The railroad is progress until it reaches a certain point, then it stops.
That's right.
Sorry, Philip. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Well, I think that's why you get that there's no coverage of this is because when you really start looking into what happened, it goes back through Biden, like stopping their ability to strike. It goes to like the Trump era, like removing restrictions on brakes, like the lobbyists didn't want to have to classify hazardous materials going through these towns, and it just keeps going back and back and back. There are so many like dirty hands in this scenario that of course the media doesn't want to cover it because there's not even a side you could pick to say, look, our side didn't have anything to do with it. Like This is like a government screw up on down the line that goes back decades.
Yes.
And that's why you're not going to hear anything on it.
Great point.
Yeah. Speaking of, James Richard gives us a super chat and says, why would these chemicals even be on a train in the first place? That speaks to what you just said, Philip, is that the lobbyists didn't want to classify or register these chemicals going through civilian towns. Because clearly
it was a law at one point.
Was it?
It was a law at one point that they had to declare these hazardous materials, and then they lobbied Congress to get that removed, so that this train going through that town was carrying these highly toxic chemicals, and nobody knew about it. It wasn't classified as that.
And when BlackRock owns these trains, at the heart of all of this, which owns everything, then you can start to maybe the conspiracy wheels start turning on this. We've got more to cover today on the show. Let's talk about this. What Edward Snowden just said about the UFOs is kind of terrifying and actually should concern all of us because it's not about aliens specifically. So NSA whistleblower, an American hero in my mind and on this show's mind, I believe, agrees with us here at Redacted, as we've been warning you over the past few days, that all of this UFO talk is just a distraction. Just a distraction to take your mind off of what's really going on here. Take your mind off of Seymour Hersh and his bombshell reporting on the Nord Stream pipeline that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Where'd that story go? Where's the mainstream media coverage of that story? Arguably one of the biggest stories in 100 years, that the U.S. carried out one of the biggest ecological terrorist attacks of all time against our allies in the EU. But no, there's no coverage of it. So it's all distraction, right? To take your mind off of other things so that the U.S. can go to war and get us fully involved in World War III with China and Russia. So right after Seymour Hersh's piece ran last week and exposed how the U.S. deep state destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline, the mainstream media snapped right to attention, fell right in line and ignored the story. And they followed in line in favor of covering this balloon story, this UFO story all of a sudden, this UFO invasion story, which they had ready to go, like ready to roll out at a moment's notice. Like, when can we roll this story out? Here we go. Are ETs or Chinese balloons attacking the United States? Are we under an invasion? It doesn't matter. Look over here, not over there. Look over there, not over here. Avert your eyes. We don't want you to see. And so Edward Snowden is spot on. He says this afternoon and agrees that, warning us all not to get distracted. He writes, it's not aliens. I wish it were aliens, but it's not aliens. It's just the old engineered panic. An attractive nuisance ensuring NatSec reporters get assigned to investigate balloon bullshit rather than budgets or bombings, a la the Nord Stream pipeline. Until next time, he writes, so keep this up for a second. So this is a part that I hadn't really thought about, but he's absolutely spot on. By having the Pentagon holding press briefings, right? And by having all of your newsrooms focused on the balloon story and UFOs, and we got to get our national security reporters down to the White House. The Pentagon's holding a briefing on this. We got to get everyone in the newsroom. Hey, the White House is calling a meeting. They're calling a briefing. The National Security Council is getting ready. They're getting all together. Go down and cover this story. Yeah, but boss, what about that story last week, the Nord Stream pipeline? I told you, go down to this new press conference they're holding. And I hadn't thought about that, but he's absolutely right. That's a total distraction. This is a way to divert newsrooms. It's a really smart play because everyone snaps to attention. He's absolutely right about that. Something big is going on here. Something really big is being planned right in front of our eyes and by your deep state government. And they're doing it under the guise of an alien UFO invasion.
He actually talks about in his book how when
Edward Snowden does.
in how when he first joined the CIA, you get access to this internal government search engine because they have their own form of Google, run by Google, and it's more anonymous than like your records pinging the server. So everyone goes and looks up things that are classified, like who killed JFK and that kind of thing. And he says, in the government records that are accessible to employees, at least, you cannot tell. He says, as far as I could tell, aliens have never contacted Earth, or they haven't contacted U.S. intelligence. That it's not like something that you can see readily as an employee of the government. He also says that, yes, man did really land on the moon, climate change is real, and chemtrails are not a thing.
Oh.
So those are his conclusions based on internal government search engines.
So we know that those government internal search engines, though, then are crap because they're totally bifurcating information from people, right? So like people get access to certain things and by the way, we know based on Philip Corso, Colonel Philip Corso, who literally worked on reverse engineering of UFO programs for the government. The stuff was kept out digitally, was not allowed to be digitized. It was literally in a filing cabinet that his superior officers wheeled to him at the Pentagon. Here is the filing cabinet of all the reverse engineering material that you need. None of this is cross-checked and saved somewhere else. So again, being digitized in some sort of a CIA database for some low-level person.
And also those employees were probably only paying for the $9.99 per month version. You pay for $20, you get it all.
They weren't paying for Google, the G Suite of products, Google.
Right.
So anyway, something is being planned right in front of our eyes, guys. Like right now, the deep state, they're doing it under the guise of a UFO invasion. We're going to get all into more of this in just a moment here. But first, let me just address something. Last night, many of you sent me emails. You emailed me thinking that maybe, and I think you may have misunderstood me, and I want to be clear about my position on this. I think you thought I was somehow being dismissive of UFOs. No, I'm being dismissive of this government narrative that suddenly we're under attack by UFOs. That to me is garbage. No, we are not under attack by UFOs. In fact, on this show, we've been covering that for about 2 years now. How the Senate started talking about this. Marco Rubio started talking about this. And I predicted this 2 years ago on this show. We can find the tape where I said, mark my words, they're going to start to use this as a threat in order to increase our military defense budget. they're going to say, oh, you know, we don't know what these things are, but we got to really start spending more money for an advanced space program or our Space Force or all of these things. We got to start spending more money on that. So I am fully in on this.
Oh, yeah, he is.
And I've been covering this UFO story for years. I have spoken to all manner of government employees, members of the military who've told me amazing things that they've seen about our secret government and our UFO programs in the government. They exist. Going all the way back to the U.S. retrieval of the UFO wreckage at Roswell, which was taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio. Even going back to my time on Fox News, interviewing Air Force One pilots about how they had interactions with UFOs while flying presidential candidates in the air, about technology that was beyond our own capabilities. Like, here's a little retrospective, just to a palate cleanser. Watch.
Not a lot do. This pilot, though, who flew Barack Obama during his 2008 presidential campaign, says UFOs are real, and he's seen one firsthand. Here to share his almost unbelievable stories, pilot Andy Danziger. Nice to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Now, we should be clear that this incident that you saw happened in 1989. Why did it take so long for you to talk about it?
So, yeah, that was me many moons ago. That was about maybe more than 10 years ago now, probably, right?
You were such a baby.
Such a baby face. What's amazing, it's been almost impossible since that time to get any member of the White House or Congress to talk at all about UFOs. It's a subject they never ever talk about. And what the government is secretly doing about them, they don't talk about it. It's been impossible. No one would talk about it on the record, actually, for fear of losing their job. So it was with great alarm then that suddenly everyone is now talking about this story. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is talking about it. Just look at how NBC and CBS News both led their nightly news broadcasts last night. Watch this.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. It has happened again today. Another aerial object was shot down by U.S. warplanes.
Tonight, the growing mystery and the race to recover those unidentified objects shot down by U.S. fighter jets. Defense Secretary Austin saying today they were a threat to civilian aircraft.
Yeah. So now we're all in on it, right? Suddenly, now the White House, the Senate, the Congress, the Pentagon is all giving us license to talk about it, so it's all a distraction. In fact, you have top U.S. generals coming out holding a press conference. This is crazy. Top U.S. general not ruling out aliens after military shoots down 3 UFOs. This is not about aliens at all. This is about fear so they can distract you from what's really going on. Just listen to the White House's John Kirby go into great detail about how the White House is talking now openly about UFOs. Like, what world do we live in now? Watch.
The president also instructed the intelligence community to take a broad look at the phenomenon of unidentified aerial objects. Indeed, President Biden conducted the first ever daily intelligence briefing session devoted to this phenomenon back in June of 2021. He was briefed that this is not just an issue for the United States, but one for the rest of the world. And as I said, our friends and our partners are dealing with this as well. We worked on a bipartisan basis to stand up an office at the Pentagon to study this in partnership with the intelligence community, academic institutions, and the private sector. These unidentified aerial phenomena have been reported for many years without explanation or deep examination by the government. President Biden has changed all that. We are finally trying to understand them better.
Okay. Really? That's odd to hear from the podium, literally reading from prepared notes. When have we heard that before? We never hear that. It gets laughed off as like a joke by and no reporters ever ask questions about it. It's always like, oh my God, I can't believe he actually asked President Trump.
Without a joke.
Yeah, like, or David Letterman asks Obama about it or something, or Jimmy Kimmel asks, Bill Clinton about it, George Bush about it or something, or Hillary Clinton. But it's never part of a normal conversation, and now suddenly it is. So this morning at the Senate, the U.S. Senate held a stunning classified hearing briefing, and according to Punchbowl News this morning, U.S. senators went behind closed doors to try and get answers about these UFOs. Here are some of the people who are briefing these senators specifically. These were the same people that were trotted out at that press conference the other day, which I thought was really odd. But again, these are the same people here that are now briefing U.S. senators. And look at the names on this list. Who's there third on that list? NORAD, U.S. Northcom. General Glenn Van Herk, Commander, North American Aerospace. So what's going on?
Like I've said in the past, this is like the perfect boogeyman because you're not going to have independent media to be able to verify aliens because none of us can go to space. So it's like they can create the perfect enemy. It's the perfect boogeyman for the next move because like then they can get unlimited funds because they can, photoshopping its spacecraft will be easy for propaganda. So it's like it's like the perfect next step with what we've seen.
Yeah. It's amazing too, because that this is all about money, right? And they can't confirm this stuff. We can't send people out there to find it. So we just have to rely on what they're telling us here. And if we're being invaded, like we showed you all like last night, I went into great detail about the Battle of Los Angeles during World War II, like bringing us into World War II, over that story. So what is going on here? Well, we can't be sure, but there is one thing we can be sure of. Last year, we were when we started talking about these UFOs, specifically about the Senate trying to raise money about this, and Marco Rubio was trotted out, and he was talking, these things can be a threat. This is definitely a threat to our national airspace because we don't know about this, and if we can't track these things, and we really got to ramp things up here, and we got to find out more about this. And then, of course, they're having this meeting today with the Senate behind closed doors, and I guarantee you they're going to come out. We're going to have to spend more money on our national defense, our air defense systems. This is a really concerning problem, and all a distraction for a bigger, broader story that they're trying to draw us into World War III against Russia and China. So Marco Rubio claims UFOs have been flying over the U.S. for years, he says. And here he says, look, they're shot down over the last 3 days are nothing new. Yeah, this is nothing new. And I've been watching this for years. This is happening routinely. And this is big. This is a big concern in the United States.
I can't wait until we're going through TSA.
What was that?
I was going to say, I can't wait till we're going through TSA and they're going to be like, are you an alien? No. Okay, well, we need to put you through this scanner because we kind of think you are.
Right. Both things you're saying is true, is that you believe in UFOs, but you also believe that the government is using this as a scapegoat to ratchet up its defense.
Right. We've had, guests on this show we've had Michael Horn and other people on the show. Like thousands of years of this has been happening, and suddenly now they're attacking the United States. Like, give me a break. Like, it's an absolute ridiculous thing. And so they're going to use it as a distraction, just like Edward Snowden said. They're going to use this as a distraction. And by the way, we featured former FBI special agent last night, John DeSouza, on the show, who said this is their plan. They've had this UFO fake invasion story ready to go that they're going to roll out. And he predicted this over a year ago. Mm-hmm. I reached out to John. I want to have him on the show. Actually, we're going back and forth today about that. But I said, you were right. Like a year ago, you accurately predicted this. You said this was their playbook, and they're rolling it out right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I find it interesting. And last I knew, they so the original balloon that started the whole thing, that was shot down and recovered. But these remaining ones, or these unidentified ones that they've shot down, they haven't gone out and recovered, have they? The last
Not that I know of.
They hadn't even gone out to so they just like shot them down. They're like, okay, end of story.
That was cool.
But they did today say they got valuable intelligence information from that first balloon that they shot down. Okay, great. We shot down the fluffy part. We really analyzing that bottom part. Okay.
I love that they say like it's a threat to civilization, yet debris falling towards Earth is no threat at all.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've got more news to get to here on this Tuesday, on this Valentine's Tuesday. We're going to talk about Google pre-bunking your stories for you. So when you do search results, they'll take care of it. So if you want some information, don't worry, they'll block it for you. They're going to make sure that it's sanitized just for you. And no vaccine, don't worry. No social security check. We'll tell you where that's happening. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because they just rolled out their new earnings calendar where you can get great updates and information about different companies that you're tracking and following, all on an earnings calendar, so you can see when they're coming out, all visualized, so you can make a decision whether you want to invest in certain companies or not. Earnings season coming up, you can click on the calendar, see them right there. No more hunting and pecking around the internet to try to find out when is, Tesla announcing earnings or any of that stuff. It's right there. Moomoo provides clean-cut, bite-size analysis pieces covering 25 of the most popular stocks right there in the earnings calls. You can join the other 19 million like-minded users in discussions under these topics to exchange ideas and insights. And now it could help you add U.S. and AU companies Australian companies earning release dates right to your calendar. So, and our Australian viewers, pay attention. There's some good news for you. For a limited time only, Moomoo is running an Australian $110 cash reward promotion for opening your first account and depositing $1,000 in your account. So they give you $110 just for doing that. Deposit any amount and you'll be rewarded with a $20 cash coupon. And if you deposit more than that $1,000, you'll get a $90 additional bonus and an extra reward there. So all great stuff. Plus 180 days of brokerage-free Australian and U.S. stock trading. So go to redacted.inc/Moomoo, redacted.inc/Moomoo today to get up to 15 free stocks. Again, redacted.inc/Moomoo. 15 free stocks right now from our friends over at Moomoo.
All right. Well, Google is expanding its disinformation campaign in Germany and India because the one they did in Poland they thought was really successful. They are literally calling this inoculation. They are inoculating you and users from misinformation. Now, like other things that you use for inoculation, we can consider it a information vaccine, right? It makes you more able to cope with misinformation. It doesn't stop the spread of misinformation. It just makes you less susceptible to it. You see what I did there?
Oh, I see.
But they are using these words, not me. They literally call it their inoculation campaign. These are videos that Google produces and they run on Facebook. So Facebook's in bed with this too. YouTube and TikTok. Google makes them to counter information that it does not like. Information about what? Well, according to the Associated Press, topics include COVID, immigration, climate change, elections. So I thought here, if I give you this little quiz here. Now, Google says they started with this test pilot. So look at this option here. What subject amongst these subjects do you think that they started with? Given these options, what do you think they started a misinformation test campaign with?
Google Prebunking.
Distrust in democratic institutions.
Okay, that's your vote.
Go ahead, Philip.
That would have been my vote too. That would have been my vote, is distrust in democratic institutions.
Okay.
I'm going to go with climate change.
Okay, you're all wrong. If you answered, let's see if anybody in the chat, can you just?
Yeah.
No, okay. If you answered Ukraine, you would be correct. Google started this very important problem of disinformation to align itself with NATO war narratives. Interestingly enough. I mean, they could have started with any dangerous narrative in the world. They could have started with childhood obesity. They could start by helping elderly people learn to identify online scams. Wouldn't that be something? Like Google is actually going to help you not get scammed by scammers and social security scammers.
Right, like if you got an email, like grandma got an email and it was like, Social Security, we're going to give you more in your Social Security check. Click here.
Like, grandma, don't do that.
Prince from a
any of those things.
Yeah.
You notice from this list that the only topics on the list of things they want to counter about misinformation are topics that will either give governments or corporations more power if you do not question them.
I have a question about that, though.
That's something I want to...
Does that...
Philip first, and then David.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. So that was what I was going to point out here, was where it says there at the bottom, like the authoritarian propaganda and distrust in democratic institutions. What that's saying is basically like anything put out by people we don't like, then we want to, that's disinformation. So if it's authoritarian propaganda, but what about like democratic institution propaganda? That's actually something they're going to be doing for them.
Yes.
So they're actually going to be producing propaganda for the democratic institutions they like, while like stifling authoritarian propaganda. I mean, it's interesting. They're like just basically saying, we're going to get in bed with these guys right now, and we'll just make their own propaganda for them. Because
that's what it feels
that's
like.
what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and my question is, does that mean they're going to open up so that if I search something, I get all the results? I just get told which one is propaganda? Or are they going to continue to do what they already do? Because you can't find information that's valid on any of that stuff already. So it's like it's already been...
Let's take a look at how they do it. How they're inoculating you. And we'll see if that, I don't think that really answers your question, but we'll see. Again, none of these things on this list are about anything that would do anyone, like really be good for humanity. It's only good for corporate interest. Like normalize not drinking, right? That would be a nice one. Or stop feeding children too much sugar. Be kind to all people based on their skin color, not based on their skin color.
Focus on who you are, not what.
Right. Like inclusive humanity, those kind of things. Yeah, I guess, like, sure, there's a lot of misinformation there about alcohol and food and sugar and education. And I was just listening to Honestly podcast about misinformation about how children learn to read and how these women got super rich in the 80s and 90s, drove Maseratis by peddling this reading program that actually was completely ineffective, and children did not learn to read. And like, those are things that absolutely we could use some misinformation aid about, but that's not what we're doing. So I think this makes it clear that the corporate idea of disinformation is really only related to corporate and government interest, not at all in human interest, or else they would use it differently. So let's take a look at how they applied this to a problem in Ukraine. This is a pre-bunk video that I thought was very successful. Remember, they ran this in Poland, so it is in Polish, and there are subtitles.
Wojna w Ukrainie trwa nie tylko w terenie, ale także w twoim telefonie. Żeby wygrać tę wojnę, niektórzy będą próbować tobą manipulować, robiąc z Ukraińców kozła ofiarnego i winiąc ich za twoje problemy.
Hej, wszystko gra?
Pytamy, jak ci idzie szukanie mieszkania.
Przez tych Ukraińców nie mogę znaleźć mieszkania.
Co?
Polacy nie mają już gdzie mieszkać. Rząd zabiera nam mieszkanie i rozdaje za darmo Ukraińcom.
Uważasz, że to wina Ukraińców? Nie rób z nich kozła ofiarnego.
Kozła ofiarnego?
No, nie zwalaj wszystkich swoich problemów i nieszczęść na innych. To absurd. Sprawdzałeś, kto to napisał? Co to w ogóle za strona?
Co to za różnica? Po co ktoś ma mnie oszukiwać?
Na przykład, żeby odwrócić twoją uwagę. Żebyś obwiniał uchodźców za wszystkie swoje problemy, zamiast skupić się na wojnie, która ich tutaj sprowadziła.
Jeśli ktoś twierdzi, że złożone problemy są winą konkretnej osoby czy grupy, to może być manipulacja. Kozioł ofiarny to jedna z najczęściej używanych technik szerzenia dezinformacji. Nie daj się manipulować.
Okay. So I think the spirit of this is fine. You shouldn't reduce your problems to any one group of people. They are also telling us, though, not to blame anything on refugee problems when there are, in fact, refugee problems in the world. In many places.
In Poland, Poland is under the weight of 5 million refugees.
Yes. It's a valid question to ask, how will Poland survive an influx of refugees? That is not represented in this video. We have shown you the research showing that there is a refugee problem in Poland. You shouldn't feel hateful and grumbly like this dude about it, right? But listening to Google tell you to go brush those questions aside doesn't solve any problems either. How is the Western world supposed to meaningfully absorb immigrants from all war-torn places, not just Ukraine?
Right.
How will countries continue to provide for Ukraine? How will we make sure that Ukrainians are not getting special treatment above immigrants from other countries that are also suffering and in line at refugee programs? What kind of Ukrainians that could not immigrate and had to stay, that couldn't leave Ukraine and had to stay there and fight a war they don't want? What about those people, right? These are all valid questions, and Google's basically telling you, knock that off and be the kind of person who sits casually in a cafe, please.
Just be a neutral person. Go on antidepressants so you don't feel one way or the other. You're not too volatile and you're not too down here. Just be steady Eddie, just in simple Google search results. That's what they want.
Right. And
Stupid critical thinkers.
Yeah.
Right.
A post.
My question. Sorry.
Yeah.
My question would be I wonder if we'll see anything from Google this pro-labor union to inoculate people so they're not against unions. You know that they would be quiet on that one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone in the chat says 1.5 million refugees, Clayton, not 5 million. No, we've talked to sources in Poland who've said it could even be higher than 5 million. So that's even being conservative. Those are numbers that come from sources we've had here on the show specifically, but maybe those numbers change. The government's not coming out with official numbers. Anyway, sorry.
Well, this is a project from Jigsaw, which is a branch of Google that's working on this. And they said that negative stories about refugees have real world impacts because there's been 65 attacks on refugee shelters in Germany alone, which is not nothing. But imagine throwing all the weight of Google to solve a problem in the world for something that's happened 65 times. Of course, that shouldn't be happening, but there's child trafficking in the world that they could be trying to solve, right? But not just something that's happened 65 times in Germany. Abuse of other groups happens much higher incidence. All of this money in towards this problem, you would almost think that they were doing this to get us to support the NATO side of the war. Here is where they ran these ads as a test. You can see Poland, Czech and Slovakia on Facebook and Twitter. After these users saw these ads, they gave them a survey containing 1 to 3 questions to determine if the ads afterwards they could better identify fear-mongering and scapegoating. This is how they gave us those metrics. They didn't show us the survey, and this is not a peer-reviewed study, so I can't vouch for whether or not the questions they asked these people after seeing the ads were valid or reliable. But they think they were, so I'm sure they were, right?
Yeah,
that's sarcasm.
Sure.
But they showed that it could help these small percentages like feel differently after online tutorials. So what's next now? What are they going to do? Well, more. They say that they're moving new pre-bunking experiments in India and Germany with local partners and experts. Now, I wonder what disinformation they seem to think is necessary in those regions and who gets to decide. Here is one pre-bunking experiment they're working on, anti-vaccine narratives. So my question is, who's partnering with them about this? Someone that may have a vested interest? I don't know.
Will Pfizer, Moderna have anything to do with this?
Now, the Associated Press says, I didn't see this in Google's information, but this was in the AP story about it, that the effects of these videos, of these inoculation videos, wears off. Like, you might think critically for a while and then you forget.
Like a vaccine.
Like core training.
Like the COVID vaccine. It wears off after.
Yes. And so they need boosters. What?
Can I just want to see if I understand this correctly. Like, basically, if you're what you're talking about is that you're talking about like change people's like core beliefs. Like they're aiming at your core beliefs. They're aiming at your morals and like your like entire world paradigm. And they think that if that changes, it just kind of reverts back.
Yeah.
Like is that just like that blows my mind. Like
it's like an exercise.
Maybe I work differently than the people
Yeah. So they're thinking that you need boosters. Booster videos. They use this term. I guess they think that we have a positive connotation with it these days. But they think they need to do booster pre-bunking videos to keep users sharp, which is funny because, pre-bunking, inoculation with boosters, these are words I increasingly do not want to hear. Right. But the question remains, why is Google doing this? They have not been a moral authority, at least not in their inception. They were a ranking information. That's all they did. I mean, we know they do a lot more, but now they're promoting narratives.
They're doing it for money. They want Google to be what they see as a safe place for advertisers, right? So it's the same reason that they block us on YouTube. They, shadow ban channels. They can make plenty of money off of our channel through advertising, but they push down because they want to make this platform and Google like an advertiser-friendly place. And so if Pfizer, Moderna, and all of these companies can continue to funnel them all sorts of billions of dollars in advertising revenue for their pharmaceuticals and everything, then it's a safe environment for Google. Imagine if Pfizer execs are sitting there and they're thinking about where to put their ad dollars.
Yeah.
And they start seeing Google search results that are like, Pfizer this, Pfizer that, Moderna this. They downrank all of this stuff to push that stuff away, and they continue to make their good ad revenue.
But now they don't even have to produce ads anymore because Google is essentially doing it for them. So imagine what a pre-bunking video would look like around a COVID vaccine. You'd see some grumbly dude with a dark hat like that guy, like, these things, I'm not going to take them because my uncle said Bill Gates, blah, 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 right?
Right.
I can't even repeat some of the narratives here.
So like what the thing is, like this is just like in such short. It hasn't been all that long ago. Like a couple of weeks since the Davos had that brain transparency. Yeah. Seminar where they're like, this is all exactly what they were talking about at Davos. It was like that brain transfer. They're like basically like we need to get into people's brains.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they know They know that they are losing the information war, and now they're going to have to go outside of us going to them. Because lately, like recently, it's us going to them to search for information, but we have found ourselves, you can't find good information there. So the people that are not going on are looking outside of Google. So now they have to find ways to win the information war by going outside of that with marketing campaigns to pull us back into their narrative. They're losing us.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen this too with cable news, and of course you're seeing with the mainstream media, and they're having to just, I don't know, it's a losing battle because independent media continues to rise, the rise of Rumble and so forth, and rise of alternative video platforms. They're going to keep getting stronger and adding new users and adding new users. You saw what happened to Facebook. I mean, that whole population is being aged out on Facebook. Right? Like there's no new users, although they said there were, but I don't buy that for a second. New people aren't coming into Facebook. Like, who's today deciding to wake up a young person like my son's like, Dad, can you help me set up one of them Facebook accounts?
No.
Could you imagine?
If you were getting new users, you wouldn't be laying off 14,000 people. You wouldn't be losing thousands of people at your place if you were doing better.
I know when they had Facebook had their most recent earnings call, and they said they added all sorts of new users. I was like, what? After a quarter where they announced they had their first round of like huge decline in users and no new, like where are these new users suddenly coming from? It all sounded fake to me in order to prop up a stock. Like, I don't know. So I think you're right about this. I think that there's like, I don't know. They're trying to make it nicer, but it's a losing battle because eventually people are going to turn away from Google fully and go to other services like they are on YouTube, but finally starting to move towards Rumble and other platforms.
Yeah, I like Lyndon Watson in the chat calls this IQ blockers. That's a good one. Yeah. All right. You have the last word on that. Thanks so much.
That's good. All right. For that, we are going to move to Rumble. In fact, that's what we're going to do right now. So come on to the 35,000 of you that are on YouTube right now, a censorship pro platform, which is YouTube. Come on over to Rumble, which is censorship free, where our stream will continue. We're going to do a story on vaccines over there. So come on over and join our Rumble community. Rumble.com/redacted is the place you can go. Rumble.com/redacted. Come on over. It's nice and warm over here. We've got almost 230,000 followers on Rumble right now, which is great. Catching up. We have 1.7 million on YouTube. So got some room to catch up there on Rumble. So come on over and